Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing one of the most innovative dive watches available at any price. From Sinn Diving of Frankfurt, Germany, this is the UXS GSG 9 edition, also known as the EZM 2B. The watch is made of U-boat stainless steel that is then tegimented and hard black coated. More on that in a moment. Let's talk about fit. It's 44 millimeters in diameter. It's 13.4 millimeters thick. The lug-to-lug dimensions of the case across the wrist, 51 millimeters. But if we include these end links, then the total rigid distance across the wrist, the fit size, is 54.5 millimeters with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and the watch is a good fit. You can see it's surprisingly thin for a 5,000 meter water-resistant watch, and it will actually fit underneath most sleeves. That said, it's broad enough that I would say don't wear this watch if your wrist is smaller than 15 centimeters. 15 is fine. I wouldn't go any smaller than that. Let's take a look at the bracelet. Sinn makes impressive bracelets and cases. You can see it's basically a alternating set of intermediate and primary links, and it's all a media blasted finish. It's all matte finish. You can see that removable links are fixed by hex screws. This is to avoid accidental stripping off of screws. It's a lot harder to strip a hex screw than it is to strip the more common flat screws that are often used on watch bracelets. So no flathead screws here, just hex screws for durability. Now we can also appreciate that this is a dive watch, and a dive watch deserves a diving clasp, which we have right here. The diving clasp is a fold out. It is thick gauge steel like the clasp itself, and then we have 3 divots drilled in. There's a spring bar, so you can use a strap tool to change the anchoring point. So you have a couple of different ways to change the fit of the watch when it's on your wrist. And of course we have a clamshell that locks all this closed. The hard black coating on the bracelet is the same as the hard black coating on the case. We may as well talk about these materials because they're kind of a big deal. Here you can see it says on the back, German U-boat steel. What does that mean? Well, first, it is much harder than standard 316. Its primary benefit is that you don't need to rinse it after exposure to either sweat or sea salt, whereas with conventional stainless steels like 316, you generally should, because in time they will begin to show marks of corrosion. This never will. It's also a little bit of a harder steel, so it starts at about 350 Vickers to about 250 for a standard 316 or 904L steel, but then Sinn does a couple of things to change that. First, Sinn only applies its hard black coating today on tegimented steel. The tegimented steel is approximately 1,500 to 1,800 Vickers. It's a carbon diffusion process that actually penetrates quite a few microns into the case, with the result that the face of the case is effectively as hard as ceramic or even sapphire. So by first hardening the U-boat steel, Sinn creates a platform on which you can then apply incredibly hard and scratch-resistant but somewhat brittle black coating, which is thousands of Vickers in hardness. Now, the reason it often chips off other watches is because you put the hard material over a soft underlying steel. So the impact causes the hard black to push on the inner steel, which collapses, causing the hard black to chip like an eggshell as the softer steel underneath collapses. But with tegimented U-boat steel under here, we have a super hard steel that provides a base for the hard black, so it cannot crack because it will not be compressed on a soft substrate. So with a hard substrate, we can use a hard coating that now has no danger of chipping or cracking. So you get a watch that is basically impervious to scratches. Okay, more details. The bezel. It's a design that Sinn calls captive bezel design. So you can see how there are little screws that hold the bezel to the case. You can't accidentally knock this bezel off the case. You would have to disassemble it by removing the screws to take it off the case, with the result that unlike a Rolex or an Omega or a Tag Heuer, you can't actually hit something and knock the bezel off the case. And that's important because this watch is intended for the GSG 9. Variants of the UX are alternately used by KSM, which is a German Navy elite combat swimmer division, and also GSG 9, which is a elite tactical unit within German federal police. A very high-end sort of domestic commandos. They are active against organized crime, weapons traffickers, human traffickers, drug traffickers, and they are actually anonymous. Their actual identities are state secrets so that they cannot be personally hounded or compromised by the people they seek to neutralize. So that you have the GSG9 tactical logo on the dial. Very cool. The watch is remarkably luminescent. And as you can see, there's a huge luminescent pearl in the bezel. We have a luminescent seconds hand that is unmistakable because it's loomed over its entire length. And I don't know why every dive watch doesn't have a loomed seconds hand. It should. This one does. The bezel feel is very sharp, but it is a 60-click bezel. It's one of the chattiest bezels I've ever heard. It's got a very loud report to it. Now, there's what you can see, and yet you can't see. Let me clarify. See that little name Hydro underneath the minute hand? Hydro is a technology that Sinn originally deployed on Bell & Ross watches, which Sinn manufactured from 1992 to 2002, but they deployed this technology on Bell & Ross watches in the late 90s. And a little bit like a Resonance Type 3 or Type 5, you have an oil-filled dial. So the case itself is incompressible because internally it's filled with a silicone-based oil. So water squeezes, the case pushes back. The oil is incompressible. Because the battery module inside the case can only withstand 5,000 meters of pressure, that is how the watch is rated. But it is a 12,000 meter case and a watch that is rated 5,000 meters. So Hydro gives you a couple of other advantages besides this insane diving depth. First, it will never fog. You'll never have condensation or fogging of any kind. Second, because the sapphire crystal and the oil have exactly the same index of refraction, you can view the watch from any angle without distortion. And let me just clarify that when you try that with a normal watch, it's just not possible. You can see how it's immediately difficult to read at an extreme angle. Well, at any angle, no matter how extreme, you can see the hands of the watch. That's the other idea behind the oil. Now, the movement. Underneath all of this, we have an ETA 955 thermal line. This is the ETA 955.652. So it's a quartz movement that is thermocompensated, meaning it is extraordinarily accurate. Standard quartz is accurate to plus or minus 15 seconds a month. This is plus or minus 10 seconds a year. It does have hacking or stop seconds. It does have a quick set date. It is a lifetime movement with 7 jewels that is watchmaker assembled and watchmaker serviced. Being thermocompensated, you can wear it in extreme heat and extreme cold, and the timing of the watch will not change. And there are other technologies, including special lubricants used by Sinn, that allow this watch to be resistant against temperatures as extreme as minus 20 degrees Celsius and plus 60 degrees Celsius. Very, very impressive. This watch is almost indestructible by scratches, scuffs, or even the forces of nature. 5,000 meters water resistant, one of the coolest divers you will find, and affordably priced. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this Sinn EZM 2B.